Hello everyone, welcome back to my eFarm Django project series. My name is Peter Evans if you're new here. So today we're diving into some exciting new additions to our Django backend. We've got the three new models, the wait record, the culling record, and the quarantine records, the ones that you're seeing on your screen. So let's take a closer look at what each of these models does and how they fit into our eFarm ecosystem. So first up, we have the weight record model. This allows us to keep track of the weight records of our cows, and it shall include details such as the cow, the date of the record, and the weight in kilograms. Next, we have the culling record model. It helps us to monitor and manage cows' culling events, and it shall include information about the cow, the reason for culling, the date, and any additional notes related to the culling event. And finally, we have the quarantine record model. This model enables us to record the quarantine events for our cows, and it shall include details about the cow, the reason for quarantine, the start and the end dates for quarantine, and any relevant notes. And so without much ado, let's jump straight into PyCharm and explore these models. Over here, we have our models open and ready for us to explore, starting with the weight record model. It has the three fields, the cow, the date, and the weight in kgs, quite descriptive. Of course, you know that each and every weight record must be tied to a specific cow. It must have the date, as well as also the amount of weight that was actually recorded. So we are also performing some validation checks over here based on the weight, as well as also the cow's availability status. And then we override the save method to call the clean to ensure that all these validation checks are effected. And you might be wondering the reason why we have the method, this one, validate frequency of weight records here, that it's not actually placed over here. So the reason why I'm doing so is the nature of how Django works. You can see we have this field, the self.date over here, and it's actually being populated automatically by Django. So how Django works is that if you specify something like this field of the date field shall be actually added at the stage of save method inside the model execution. So if we place it in the clean method, then our method over here, the validate frequency of weight record, shall complain of the none type object. The date is actually only availed inside the save method. So that's the reason why we have it over there. And then we have the culling record over here that also have the fields, the cow, the reason, the date, as well as also the notes. These are also quite descriptive. Each and every culling record must be tied to a specific cow. There must be a reason for culling. There must be the date for culling, as well as also the notes if only applicable, because you see we have the null is equal to true over there. And then we also perform some validation checks as well inside the clean method where we validate the single culling. So this shall ensure that there's only a single culling record tied to a single specific cow. So since we've actually overridden the clean method, we have to explicitly call it over there. And then lastly, we have the quarantine record model that has these fields, the cow, the reason, the start and the end dates, as well as also the notes. Quite descriptive and quite similar to the previous two models that I've actually just talked about. So the cow field shall actually ensure that each and every quarantine record is linked to a specific cow, the reason for quarantine, the start and the end dates for the quarantine, as well as also the notes if applicable. You can see we have the null is equal to true. And then we also go ahead and perform some validation checks based on the reason for the quarantine, as well as also the date availed for the quarantine start and the end dates you can see over here. And then last but not least, for the models, we also override the save method to ensure that all these validation checks, these two, are actually effected whenever a quarantine record is being saved. So we head over to our validators.py to explore these new validation checks that we've added. First up, we start with the validate weight. These ones are for the weight record validation. So we ensure that there is no cow that is actually having less than 10 kilos, as well as also 1.5 tons in our farm. So the reason why I'm doing so is because I've never seen any cow that is less than 10 kilos, as well as also a dairy cow that is more than 1.5 tons. So this could be not accurate according to whatever you have, or maybe whatever you've seen, or maybe whatever you've learned. So you can tweak them to fit in your situation very well. So then we have the validate cow availability status, where we ensure that for each and every cow that is having its weight record to be actually keyed in must be alive. So the cows that are dead, or maybe the sold cows, will throw the error. Weight records only allowed for cows present in the farm. This cow is marked as either dead or sold. And then we also have the validation of the frequency of the weight records. So this method actually ensures that each and every cow has only a single record per day. So what we do over here is that we use the default objects manager to filter the weight records based on the cow as well as also the date that is applied, and then we ensure that it's only one, where if it's greater than, so technically this will return the weight record if it was there for that day, as well as also that instance of weight record that is supposed to be saved. So of course it will be greater than 1, and then we shall throw this error, this cow is already weighed on this date. And then now we move over to the culling validator, this one over here. It has only a single method, that is the validate single culling. So we ensure that each and every cow that has its culling record must only have that single instance of culling. It makes sense because there's no way you can cull a cow today, tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, and so on. So that is actually whatever we are doing over here, where we are going ahead and now using this related manager over here, where there's the cow.culling record.all. So by the way, you might be wondering where this culling record is coming from, yet it was not in the cow model. So what we are doing over there is that, let me just take you a little bit to the culling model. Yeah, you can see over here we have the related name, the culling record. So with this related name, we are able to perform queries such as the cow. This is just an example, the cow.culling record. So that is what actually I've gone ahead and done over there. So back to here, this shall return a related manager query set, and then now we check if there's the existing culling record, and then we also want to now key in another culling record for that specific cow. We shall throw a cow can only be tied to one culling record. And then lastly, we head over to the quarantine validator, having these static methods. First up, we validate the reason for quarantine, where we ensure that if the cow is quarantined because it's a newly bought cow and yet the cow is not marked as bought, then we shall throw this error. This is an invalid reason. This cow was not bought, therefore that cannot be the reason. Of course, that makes sense for you as well as for me. And then we also validate the dates, where we ensure that the end date must be a later date than the start date. So you understand that there's no way like the start date can be in the future and then the end date is less than the start date. I hope you understand the rationale over there. And then we also ensure that if the primary key of that quarantine record is not there, then the end date must not be actually availed. So the rationale over here is that whenever we are actually saving a quarantine record, by that time we do not have its primary key, because primary key is only available for objects that have been successfully saved into the database. And at the state where this method is being called, that quarantine record does not have its primary key, and that technically means that the quarantine must have not ended, but it has started because it's just being saved. So I hope that makes sense for you. And so with that, let's head over to the signals.py. So today we have two new signals, the set cow production status to be culled, as well as also the set cow production status to be quarantined. These two signals are pretty similar. They listen both to the post-save signal of the culling record as well as also the quarantine record respectively. So the first one, the one for the status to be culled, actually goes ahead. If the culling record is saved, then it goes ahead and checks the current production status of the cow and makes it to be culled and then saves that cow. The same principle applies over here, where it's changed to be quarantined and then the cow is saved. So that was pretty short for the signals.py. So we head over to the serializers. For today, there is nothing really new for our serializers over here. As you can see, we are just specifying the model as well as also serializing all the fields. And then for our cow field, we are specifying the primary key, where now we shall be able to actually select the cows. You can see the same thing applies over here for the culling record as well as also for the quarantine record. So our serializer does not have a lot. So with that, now we head over to the permissions.py over here. So for the today's tutorial, I actually added 3 new permissions, starting with this one, can act on weight record. So this one is actually restricted for the farm management, where it's only the farm owner the farm manager as well as also the assistant farm manager, who can have access to either add, delete, update, as well as also list or maybe see the weight records for the cow of our farm. And if that person is not, or rather if that request is not actually authenticated, we shall throw this error. Or maybe if the person does not have the sufficient rights, let's say the person is a worker, then we shall have this authentication error message that will be the only farm owners and managers have permission to perform this action. So the same principle apply over here. It's only that for this one over here, we restrict it to the farm owner and the farm manager. We know very well that culling is a very serious issue and it's a very important activity into the farm, and so that's why it's actually restricted only for the farm owner as well as also the farm manager. So over here, we do not have the assistant farm manager. So the same principle applies as well for the quarantine record, because these are always very crucial decisions to be performed in the farm, and it's only the farm owner and the farm manager. And so that's it for our permissions.py. I hope you understand whatever is actually happening over here, but if you have any question, please don't hesitate to ask that out. And so I'll head over to the views.py. So today we also have 3 new view sets. First up, we start with the weight record view set, where we also activate the filtration just as we did from the previous tutorials. And so we shall be filtering based on whatever is actually supplied in our weight record filter set class. And I hope you are familiar now with whatever is actually happening over here, these attributes that we've supplied over here. So if you are not actually understanding as well, you can also ask, or maybe you can just watch on the very first, or maybe just some previous tutorials that are actually talked about this in details. So we shall also be ordering the weight records based on the most recent date, as well as also now applying the permissions that we actually availed in our permissions.py over here. You can see we have the can act on weight record. So we also override the list method over here to effect the availability of the query parameters. So this is one thing that I've actually talked about more from the previous tutorials. You can as well look at that, but if you do not understand, do the very same thing that I've actually just said. So we also have the culling record view set over here, pretty similar to whatever we have in our weight record view set. So we also activate the filtration based on whatever we actually supplied in our culling record filter set, order them the same based on the most recent, as well as also now applying this permission, they can act on culling record. And then over here, we also override some of the methods that the model view set provides, that is the patch as well as also the put. So we restrict this, so there will be no any update for the culling record. It makes sense because once a cow is culled, the cow is culled, and there's no way that that cow will now be like coming back into, let's say, for example, the milking herd, because cows are always culled due to extreme reasons like low productivity, maybe terminal injury, and stuff of that kind. So we also override the list method for this culling view set to perform the same thing, where we also ensure that if the query parameters are availed and let's say the query parameters does not filter anything from the database, we shall return the no culling records found matching provided filters. And if there was just nothing in our database, or maybe there was no any culling record in our database, then we shall also throw this no culling records found of the HTTP status to 100 OK. And then last but not least, we have the quarantine record view set, where we also specify the filter set class. So we shall be filtering based on the fields that are actually availed in the quarantine record filter set. Same thing, order them based on the most recent, as well as also apply the permission classes just like we did for the previous 2 view sets. The list method also is overridden over here to ensure that if the request has the query parameters associated with it, then we shall go ahead and perform whatever is necessary. And so that's it for our views. I'll just quickly head over to the filters.py. So in our filters.py over here, yes, we start with here. So we shall be filtering the weight records based on the cow, the day of the weighing, the month of the weighing, as well as also the year of the weighing. And then we also have the culling record filter set, where we shall also be filtering based on the day of the culling, the month of the culling, as well as also the year of culling. Same thing applies to the quarantine records, where we only have a single field, so we shall only be filtering based on the reason for the quarantine. And so that's it for the today's tutorial. I mean, basically whatever we've added. So I shall go ahead and test them as usual. So in our test folder over here, then in the daily test, and then in the test views over here. So I'll actually just return this. I actually went ahead and commented them, I think, in the previous tutorial. So I think the tests for the 3 new models are just down over here. Okay, the tests are so many. As you can see, there are over 3,000 lines of code. Okay, that is culling, and then insemination. Okay, so let's start with here. So we have the test wait record view set. So the syntax is similar to whatever we've done in the previous tutorials over here. So the setup methods avails everything that we'll need for our test methods to run. So I'll just quickly go over maybe just a single test to show you the operation principle for today. So let's start with this one. We test the add wait record as a farm owner. So we send a post request to this URL over here. So remember, the reverse function goes ahead and then resolves this URL over here. So it will be something like localhost/dairy/wait records/list, or maybe stuff of that kind. And then now the request payload will be the data that we've actually availed in our conftest.py. Remember, the conftest.py is the file that actually avails everything for us, or rather carries the fixtures. So you can see setup wait record data. So we have that cow, then we save that cow, and then we set up some wait record for that cow. Remember, the wait record actually needs the cow's ID because it was a foreign key. So you can see what we do. So back to our test views over here, that is what we do. And then we also have the authorization headers, that is the farm owner's token. And then after sending that, we assert that the response status code is 201 created, as well as also the wait record is actually available for that specific cow. And so in the interest of time, we shall actually just go ahead and run the tests. Okay, now we run the PyTest. Okay, this will take a little bit of time because you can see we have 246 tests. So I'll just fast forward this and then come back after all the tests I've actually run. All right, now after 4.5 minutes, we've actually ran 246 tests and all of them has passed. And so that marks the end of this tutorial. So if you find this actually useful, please consider subscribing, liking, and sharing. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.